Picture this, it's 2018 and E3 is here. The world's biggest names in gaming have all gathered for an immense show with live performances, huge gaming reveals, all topped off with massive amounts of hype and cringe. Seriously, what the hell is going on here? Anyway, next up is Bethesda. They have an almost 2-hour presentation, and sometime towards the end, Todd Howard hits the stage and announces a brand new game. The hype is real. A brand new game from one of the best developers in the industry that isn't Elder Scrolls and isn't Fallout. Then you find out that you have to wait 5 years, which is half a decade, to get your hands on this game. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the 6th of September came and went, and we finally have our hands on this brand new Bethesda title. Over the past 5 years, Bethesda have hyped up and set the community's expectations very high. The question is, does this game live up to its expectations, or does it shatter and collapse under the gravity of its own hype? There's only one way to find out.
Here in the theater and on online at home.
Just before we start, I played the Steam version of the game. I've clocked in over 100 hours so far. I've completed the main story and all the major side quests and done a bunch of other kind of miscellaneous activities. Now, with the premise of the main story, it's basically you're a miner, you're in this cave, and you come across this object embedded into the rock. You touch it, you start tripping mega balls, and then you get invited to this group. The group's called Constellation. Now, they're a bunch of explorers, and it leads you down this path to start answering some of nature's more profound questions. Sounds pretty interesting, right? Well, it's not. It's so fucking bland. To keep it spoiler free, I'm not going to say too much more about it, but honestly, it's just meh. I did not get invested one bit into the main story. I think as much as Bethesda did try, and I tried to get invested, I just didn't find myself caring about the story, at least not the main story. The side quests, however, are much, much better, and I was a lot more engaged in the small, isolated stories of the side quests. Having said that, they're still not as strong as the side quests from Fallout and Skyrim, and I do have a theory as to why. I think it's got something to do with getting the player immersed and hooked into the game world as soon as possible. So, in Bethesda's previous titles, the developers have done an amazing job at pulling me and you, the player, into their worlds and immersing us in their worlds. And as a byproduct of that, we're far more likely to be invested in that world, to be invested in the characters, in their struggles, in the lore, and actually care about what's going on. Like the opening scene, for example, in Skyrim, which is arguably one of the best opening scenes of any game ever, in my opinion. You open your eyes in game, you're in this cart surrounded by these strangers, everyone's hands are bound, you have no idea where you're going, you're in some kind of mountain pass, you have to figure things out as you go, no context is provided immediately, and then the world opens up to you. Around every corner, every little nook and cranny you look, there's something interesting to see, to find, to do, and it's super atmospheric. It's really immersive. And from that moment on, you're hooked into the world of Skyrim. Like, I was serving in the British Army when this game came out, and I remember sitting up in my room on camp till 3 or 4 in the morning playing this game, and I'd have to be up on parade like in a few hours. But I was so hooked on Skyrim that it was borderline addiction, to be honest. But that was the power of immersion. That's the power of getting the player invested in the game from the word go. Starfield takes about 10 to 15 hours to actually start to get good at all. And by that time, for me personally, it was too little too late. Look, that was a really long-winded way of saying, if everything is equal in terms of writing and voice acting, the main difference will fall on which game offers the most immersion. So yes, the side quests here are stronger and better than the main story in regards to uniqueness and narrative strength, but because we're not as invested into the world from the start, it's really hard to care. And in my opinion, the overall experience suffers because of it. And it's such a shame because Bethesda is renowned for immersion. And this leads me into my next talking point. The other side of the immersion coin, which is how the player interacts and explores the game world. The exploration in Starfield is going to boil down to two things ultimately. Fast travel simulator then walking simulator. Basically, everywhere you go in Starfield is through menus and loading screens. You fast travel pretty much everywhere, and then once you do reach your destination, you have to walk there, and it can be up to 15 minutes of walking across a barren, uninteresting, monotonous terrain. Now, there are things to explore, don't get me wrong. There's plants and animals to scan and catalogue, and there's nothing quite like the sense of awe and wonder as you stumble across a wild herd of migrating, majestic beasts. I do apologise if that was a touch too sarcastic. Look, I do understand it must be really challenging to fill these planets with flora and fauna that is both engaging and unique. But the RNG system they've gone with means that while these life forms may look different, they all act the same. Like these creatures, they don't really do anything. They sometimes interact with one another. Sometimes you'll get a carnivore that attacks a herbivore, and you do get loot from them, but other than a novelty, there's nothing really else to do with them. There is also exploration points of interest. There's ship landing sites, there's outposts, civilians, science, etc. There's caves, there's anomalies, and there's a handful of other things to explore. But after a little while, you've seen them all. They're pretty much copy and paste. Mr. Howard touts that there are over 1,000 planets and worlds to explore. And while that's technically true, the saying, as wide as an ocean, as deep as a puddle, springs to mind. Because that's exactly what we've got here. Yes, there's points of interest to visit. Yes, there's resources to gather. And occasionally you will come across a beautiful vista or something interesting that you haven't seen before. But 90% of the time, it's all samey.
Same, but different. But still same.
It would be far better, I think, personally, if we had far fewer handcrafted planets with more to see, more to do and interact with. And for the love of God, please give us somewhere to travel around these planets faster. I don't care if it's a rover, a hovercraft, I'd take a goddamn bicycle at this stage. Apparently humanity has the technology to travel between the stars, but does not have the ability to traverse planetary terrain other than on foot. Go figure. And while we're at it, I'd love to see a usable map. The map we currently have is literally useless. It's 2023. I don't know why we can't have a map. I don't know why it was so hard for them to develop a map. I'm sure there's some technical reason for it, but surely there's a way to give us a workable map. Next, I just want to touch on the cities, because the cities are actually quite interesting. Some of them are, at least. And there's a fair bit to discover and find inside them. There's lots of people to talk to. There's lots of quests to get given. And although performance does suffer in some of the cities, they can be quite fun to explore initially. I also enjoyed exploring the actual levels and the interiors of areas. This is where I feel we get the old Bethesda back. Bethesda's always been known for building well-detailed interiors that have a lived-in, atmospheric feel to them, and there's no shortage of them here. I had a lot of fun exploring these interiors, and you know what, at times it really felt like I was playing a classic Bethesda game, with tons of loot items to discover, hidden doors, loot chests that needed lockpicking, computer terminals to unlock, lore items to find, and it's awesome just running around buildings, stuff in your pockets full of junk and crap, literally slurping up everything that isn't nailed down, and using the mechanics in creative ways to do things like this.
Hello there.
Only in a Bethesda game can you do this. I love it. Anyway, moving on to my final talking point, the FPS mechanics. Straight out the gate, I want to say there is a big improvement in the gun combat since Fallout. So credit where credit's due, there is an improvement here. But I've got quite high standards when it comes to FPS mechanics in games, and sadly, overall, I'm just not that impressed. My 4 main concerns with the FPS mechanics are: 1. All weapons seem to lack recoil and punch, they feel very flat and very lackluster. 2. Weapons like the energy and particle beam are virtually useless, meaning that you will usually stick to the ballistic type weapons, and that drastically reduces the variety. 3. Enemies are bullet sponges and pose very little threat to the player. I even turned the difficulty up, but I just never felt challenged. I never felt there was a real threat, even in boss fights. And last but not least, number 4. The enemy AI is low-key retarded, and I often found it just wasn't reacting logically or realistically to what was happening around it. I totally get there is a market out there for this type of low-key, casual, bullet spongy type of gunplay, but I can firmly assert that I am not part of that market. But each to their own, there's no judgment for those that are. It's just not for me. To summarize my thoughts, I feel Starfield is attempting to be so many things at once that it struggles to do any of them well. There's an ancient Chinese proverb that goes something like, if you chase 2 hares, you catch neither of them. Well, Starfield is chasing double-digit hares, and what we're left with is a mediocre experience. Unfortunately, it seems to me that immersion has been sacrificed at the altar of size and scale. And I really feel bad saying that. There's clearly a lot of effort from the guys and the girls that turned up for work every day for years of their lives to create this game for us. And I believe what has truly failed them is the direction they have received. I've always loved playing Bethesda games, ever since I first got my hands on them all those years ago. The immersion and the escapism that the world building and the mechanics offered at the time was unmatched. But as it stands on release in 2023, unmodded and hardly patched, I'm regrettably giving Starfield a 5.5 out of 10. Do not pay full price for this game. This game needs to be on a huge sale before it's worth your hard-earned cash. Thanks for watching, guys. More reviews coming to the channel very soon. Subscribe if that's your thing. If you found the video helpful, please like it. Really helps the channel. I am trying to grow the channel, so any little helps. Thanks again. I'll catch you next time.
As I wander the blackness of the deep abyss, my ship is in tatters, all dented and worn, but I trust my old engine to get back by morn. Way